You hear laughter before you see the faces. Silver cups raised, the clinking of gold bracelets, the shimmer of torchlight on polished marble. The air smells of honeyed wine and warm skin. You turn, and there, half in shadow, half in gold, stands a boy, unmoving, his expression practiced into serenity. He does not blink. He cannot. If you find yourself drawn to the hidden corners of history, to the stories Rome would rather we forget, make sure you're part of this journey. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It's a strange thought, isn't it, that across continents and centuries we gather here to unearth the lives buried beneath empires of stone. In the Rome of emperors and generals, beauty was its own currency, and youth its most coveted form. The empire's marble halls gleamed with triumphal arches and frescoed ceilings, but beneath that grandeur thrived a marketplace of human lives. The ports of Delos, Ephesus, and Corinth became arteries of an unspoken trade, ships arriving not only with olive oil and wine, but with trembling captives. Boys taken from villages in Thrace, Cappadocia, and the Greek Isles. The auctions were held in public squares, where laughter mingled with bargaining, and the future of a human being could be decided with the flick of a signet ring. The historian Florus once wrote that Rome conquered the world, and in return the world conquered Rome's morals. He wasn't wrong. The more the empire expanded, the more it hungered, not just for land, but for bodies. Youth was spectacle. Youth was decoration. Youth was status. At the slave market, buyers walked among the captives as one might among livestock. Eyes inspected like jewels, teeth pried open, backs examined for scars. The boys were oiled, perfumed, and stripped, not only to reveal their form, but to erase their origin. A Syrian or a Celt, once taken, no longer belonged to any land. He was a body, remade to please another. Roman buyers were particular. Greek boys were said to possess refined features and an education that made them ideal companions. Blonde-haired captives from the north were exotic, prized for their rarity. Their price could equal a soldier's annual wage. The historian Seneca described the slave auctions with disgust, though even he, in his villa, owned beautiful attendants. He wrote of the glazed eyes of the purchased, the silence of those too afraid to speak their native tongue. To the wealthy Roman, silence was elegance. A concubine who spoke too much risked more than punishment. He risked notice, and in a household of gods, notice was often fatal. From the auction block to the marble villa was a journey both short and endless. In the atrium, the boy might be bathed in rosewater, dressed in soft linen, his hair curled and dusted with gold powder. He would stand by a doorway or behind a couch during banquets, serving wine to guests who rarely met his gaze. To them, he was part of the decor, a living statue set amid mosaic floors and bronze fountains. Pliny the Younger, ever the aesthete, once wrote admiringly of a friend's villa, where the air itself seems perfumed by the presence of youth. What he meant was not metaphor. In such houses, the line between slave and ornament blurred. The boys were trained in poetry and song, in gesture and glance. They learned to pour wine without spilling a drop, to kneel gracefully, to smile when summoned. And yet, beneath every act of obedience was terror, the knowledge that every breath belonged to someone else. In a world where masters held power over life and death, refusal was unthinkable. Roman law made no distinction between a slave's labor and his body. The philosopher Ulpian wrote coldly, "Servi sunt res." Slaves are things. What kind of empire can speak so eloquently about virtue and yet purchase its pleasures in flesh? What kind of civilization builds temples to beauty while destroying the beautiful? There were rumors, whispered even among the patricians, of private chambers where the emperor himself entertained his favorites. Caligula was said to have paraded his concubines in public, draped in jewels, their faces painted to resemble gods. Nero, ever theatrical, composed songs for his boy Sporus, whom he dressed as a bride. To some it was decadence, to others divine prerogative. The line between love and cruelty vanished in the glare of imperial power, but for every name history recorded, hundreds vanished. The unnamed concubine in the senator's house, the boy taken from the docks of Antioch, the one who died unnamed before reaching Rome's gates. Their stories linger only in fragments. In a poet's passing remark about the slave who sings too sweetly, in the unearthed shackles found beneath a villa in Pompeii, small enough to fit a child's wrist. The marble rooms of Rome were designed to echo, sound moving endlessly through corridors of stone and silence. Imagine, for a moment, what those echoes carried: the faint rustle of silk, the murmur of Latin commands, the sharp intake of breath from a boy pretending not to exist. Over time, even the laughter faded. The boy in the marble room became a ghost, his name erased from ledgers, his body absorbed into history's sheen. The empire celebrated its poets, generals, and philosophers, men who debated liberty beneath frescoes painted by enslaved hands, their thoughts illuminated by oil lamps tended by trembling youths. And still the boy stands there, motionless in the candlelight, a shadow beside the glimmer of gold. His story is nowhere written, yet everywhere felt. Beneath the empire's perfection lies the soft sound of chains, perfumed, polished, and silent. The marble glows, the laughter resumes, and the doors close again. Tomorrow another ship will dock, another auction will begin. Rome's appetite was never sated. It was fed day after day by the quiet suffering of those who could not speak, and by the world that chose not to listen. The boy in the marble room is still waiting to be seen. The villa smells of rose oil and smoke, a sweetness so thick it clings to the air, masking the faint tang of iron beneath. Sunlight filters through silk curtains, gilding every surface with warmth. But warmth in this house is not comfort. It is display. The marble floors, the ivory couches, the soft laughter drifting from another room, all are part of the same performance. And somewhere behind the polished doors, someone is waiting to be summoned. The houses of Rome's elite were more than homes. They were theaters. Every column, every carved mosaic was a statement of power, and even pleasure was staged like ritual. Guests might enter through the atrium, passing slaves in gold-trimmed tunics, bowls of myrrh burning low. But what they never saw were the rooms beyond, smaller, darker spaces where the air was heavy with oil and obedience. Here the concubines lived, boys and girls alike, chosen for beauty and silence. They were taught how to walk, how to breathe, how to smile when spoken to. The first lessons came not in words, but in gestures. A hand raised meant pour, a glance meant approach, a silence meant danger. To survive was to learn the language of the house. Archaeologists have found fragments of this world: bronze mirrors worn smooth from use, cosmetic jars inscribed with names that were not Roman, bits of jewelry too delicate for a free citizen to have owned. Each object tells the same story: the art of transforming a captive into an ornament. Pliny's letters mention adorned attendants who scented the chambers. Seneca scorned those who bathed in the blood of roses and perfumed their slaves as offerings to pleasure. Yet both men, moralists in writing, lived among the perfumed chains they condemned. The conditioning began at dawn. The slaves rose before their masters, their tasks mechanical and endless. Hair was washed in imported oils, skin scrubbed with pumice and honey. The concubines learned to braid garlands, to grind pigment for cosmetics, to polish gold until it reflected the face of the one who owned them. A mistake, a drop of oil spilled, a wine jug carried too slowly, might mean a lash, or worse, silence, the kind that lasted for days. The villa of Lucius alias Rufus, unearthed near Pompeii, offered a glimpse of this hierarchy in brick and marble. Beneath the lavish triclinium where guests reclined, A small antechamber held a single bed and an iron ring fixed into the wall. Historians debate its use, but the placement tells its own truth. To the Romans, beauty required proximity and control. The slave was to be near enough to serve, never free enough to sleep. "Come here," the master might have said, softly, almost kindly. "You were born for service, not sorrow." Words like that could sound like affection, but they were chains of another kind. For every stroke of praise, there was the threat of withdrawal. The concubine's power was illusion, the privilege of being seen, and when that gaze shifted elsewhere, they vanished as easily as a whisper in the dark. Roman poets dressed this cruelty in verse. Martial wrote of boys whose hands pour nectar sweeter than the gods, while Catullus compared his lovers to tame birds, fluttering, fragile, and caged. The language of devotion and ownership intertwined until they became indistinguishable. In this world, to be loved was to be possessed, and to be adorned was to be bound. In one letter, the philosopher Musonius Rufus argued that luxury enslaves the soul as much as the body. He meant the masters, but the slaves understood it better. They lived inside that paradox, that their beauty was their prison. Every morning they rehearsed it anew. The bow of the head, the smile that concealed exhaustion, the polished silence that kept them safe. Evening brought the rituals of pleasure. The air thickened with incense and murmurs. Musicians played low, the rhythm of their lyres echoing like a heartbeat through the halls. The concubines stood ready, not as participants, but as extensions of the house itself, their presence both intimate and invisible. A guest might lift a cup and whisper admiration, but never a name. Names were not given, only replaced. Sometimes kindness appeared in small gestures, a master who allowed a concubine to keep a trinket, a ring, a lock of hair. Yet even that tenderness was ownership in disguise. To be remembered meant being possessed twice, once by the hand and once by memory. The villa itself became a machine of desire, its architecture designed for secrecy and spectacle. Water channels murmured through marble fountains, masking sounds better left unheard. Curtains softened the light, but not the gaze. Everything shimmered, even sorrow. And always the scent lingered, rose oil and iron. The perfume was both luxury and camouflage, hiding what could not be spoken. It clung to skin long after punishment, long after the tears were washed away. What happened to these boys and girls when age dimmed their value? Few records say. Some were sold again, others married off to lesser slaves, a few freed as tokens of mercy. But freedom could be its own cruelty. To step into the streets of Rome marked forever by refinement that no longer served a purpose. The body remembered the touch of command, the soul, the echo of obedience. In the ruins of Herculaneum, archaeologists found a small bronze chain, still scented faintly with resin. Nearby lay a broken amphora of rose oil. No inscription, no name. Only the silence of luxury turned to ash. The villa smells of roses again, the petals crushed for the next evening's feast. Outside, the city hums with triumph, unaware of the lives consumed to feed its beauty. Inside, the laughter rises, soft and practiced, as the doors close upon another night of perfumed chains. And somewhere beyond the curtains, another boy waits, his skin still glistening from the bath, his heart still learning the rhythm of servitude. He listens for footsteps, not hoping they'll come, but knowing they always will. The ruins glitter beneath the Roman sun, marble fragments glowing like bones beneath the dust. Tourists trace their fingers along columns that once framed the feasts of emperors. They see triumph. The earth remembers something else. Beneath every stone, silence breathes. The silence of the unnamed, the forgotten, the beautiful who were broken to make Rome shine. Centuries have passed, yet their shadows linger. The villas are gone, but traces remain, faint, almost accidental. A scrap of graffiti beneath a crumbling wall, a name half carved into marble, a bracelet too small for an adult wrist. Each fragment whispers a story of lives lived behind curtains of perfume and control, where affection was commanded and freedom was a crime. In the catacombs beyond the city, archaeologists once found a line etched into clay. I was loved, but never free. No author, no date, only defiance. Perhaps a concubine carved it, or a servant who dared to remember. To write was rebellion. To leave words where none were meant to exist was to outlast the empire that owned you. Rome's obsession with possession outlived its emperors. The Digest of Justinian preserved the old laws, the right to command, to punish, to inherit even a slave's children. What is born of the slave woman, it declared, belongs to the master. Every clause was a monument, an empire carved not in virtue but in domination. Yet love and grief leaked through the cracks. Among the ruins of Herculaneum, a bronze Eros was found, wings broken, lips curved in a faint smile. Nearby, an inscription read, "To my beloved, whose beauty outlived his name." Was it a tribute or a secret? No one can say. But it speaks to a truth Rome rarely admitted, that affection could survive even in bondage, though it was never free to speak its name. The poets hinted at what historians concealed. Statius wrote of a boy whose song fettered the heart of a god. Martial, ever cruel, described a servant who poured wine with winter in his eyes. The words were veiled, but the guilt was not. Rome celebrated mastery, yet could not forget the trembling hands that filled its cups. Not all bowed quietly. In a papyrus from Egypt, a freed woman named Anthe warns her friend, "Never let them call your silence loyalty." Her defiance is quiet, but it cuts through time. She speaks for those who learn to smile through their own erasure, whose resistance was survival itself, a refusal to disappear completely. By the Middle Ages, the empire's palaces had turned to dust, but rumor endured. Monks transcribing ancient text wrote of temple youths and forbidden companions of the Caesars. Scandal became parable, sin became warning, but the echo of truth remained. Rome, the eternal city, had built its moral order on conquest, even over its own conscience. What did the empire learn from its beauty? That to control was to be virtuous, that ownership could masquerade as love, that cruelty adorned in gold might be mistaken for civilization. The Roman ideal of restraint, the stoic calm of marble statues, was born from this. The silencing of those whose bodies taught the powerful what restraint meant. At Tivoli, a mosaic survives almost whole. Boys gathering roses in a garden. Their faces are idealized, perfect, divine. But one figure looks out from the pattern, his expression startlingly human, his eyes caught between fear and longing. Perhaps an artist, himself enslaved, slipped that truth into the marble. A secret act of remembrance buried in beauty. The empire's story, like its art, endures in fragments. The scent of rose oil still clings to amphorae in the ruins. Iron rings still mark the walls of cellars that once held servants too near to power. The wind carries whispers, laughter, the rustle of silk, the faint echo of chains disguised as jewelry. History calls them relics. They are, in truth, confessions. Beneath the Colosseum, faint scratches mark the walls, hearts, wings, fragments of names. The arena was Rome's monument to spectacle, but the marks are small, human, desperate. Perhaps one of the concubines came here once, a decoration for a visiting noble, and left this sign, a proof that someone like him once breathed the same air as gods. Now, the empire's bones lie open to the sky. Its glory gleams in museums, its cruelty in footnotes. But the silence persists, the silence of those who were loved as property, adorned as art, forgotten as people, the silence that shaped Rome's soul and, through it, the moral inheritance of the West. The sun dips low over the Forum. Shadows lengthen across the broken pillars. The wind murmurs softly through the ruins, carrying with it the echo of an unrecorded song, the lament of those who were never meant to be remembered, yet somehow still are. The empire is gone, but beneath the marble the echoes still move, faint, rhythmic, unending, like a heartbeat beneath the weight of history.